And now it's time for Shelf Life, news from the Whitchurch Stouffville Public Library, with your host, librarian Catherine Sword.
Hello, everybody, and today I'm here with author Mike Poeltl. He's a local person who grew up in town and has moved away and written a novel. So let's catch up with you, Mike. Can you tell us a little bit about growing up here and how you became a writer?
Well, I did grow up here in Stouffville. My father's from Germany and my mom from Winnipeg, and they met and they moved to Stouffville to be close to Toronto. Stouffville's changed an awful lot since I lived here.
Yeah, well, I remember you coming into the library as a child.
Yeah, is that right?
Yeah. Well, vaguely, I think. I think you were an older child, and your mom more so. But yes.
Okay. Yeah. Well, actually, I won the library award for writing here in Stouffville.
That was before my time, but yes, that was writing?
That was for a little book. I was 12.
Oh, wow. So you get bitten early for writing.
Yeah, for sure. I've been writing my whole life. I used to illustrate my own comics, things like that. It's been a bug in my ear forever.
Now, I know that the Stouffville Tribune had an article about you a while back, and it talked about your illustration and your writing. Okay, now, obviously the writing has won out. Although I thought from the article it sounded like you preferred the illustrating.
Originally, though writing had always been part of my life, illustration, the visual arts had always been very strong. And so I made a choice, and I chose illustration. And that's gotten me to where I am today as a marketing manager in my day-to-day life. But as an author, it never went away. And I started the books we're going to talk about 15 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you know, in some ways that sounds like a long time. But in others, for 2 books to come out, and you're working on a third to finish this trilogy, I believe, right?
Yep.
That's actually quite quick. Now, I take it part of the quickness is because you've done this self-publishing, and we're definitely going to talk about that at some point. But since we've opened up the topic of books, can you tell us a little bit about what your plan is with these 3?
Well, I mean, originally it was going to be 1 book, and what happened is I got a lot of questions after I released it about what's next,
what's next. Oh, yes.
So I decided there was a lot more story to tell. From there, I rapidly went through the second book, and it wrote itself almost. And the great thing was that it really took the first book into consideration, and now it's built into a trilogy.
Yes. Well, you need the first book as groundwork. I have been able to read both books, and darn you, you do the one thing that I hate about trilogies is you leave me hanging. So now I've got to wait for that third book. But I'm sure it'll be worthwhile to wait. I'm looking forward to that. But the first book does lay the groundwork. I can see why you thought that it would be one story, because it does have a nice ending and conclusion. But I can also see why people push you to do that second, because, there is too many questions there.
Yeah.
Would you like to read a part to give people a flavor to start us off on that first book?
Sure, I can read a quick scene here.
We haven't actually told anyone what the title is or a little bit about it, so maybe we should start with that.
Sure. It's called The Judas Syndrome, and the first book takes on the name The Judas Syndrome, while the second book is called Rebirth, and the third is as of yet untitled. The books are dystopian, post-apocalyptic, which is actually quite a buzzword right now, dystopian for young adult books. We'll get into whether this is young adult or not.
Yes, definitely a crossover.
Yeah. The scene I'll just read quickly from The Judas Syndrome. They're in the post-apocalyptic setting now, which threatens to snuff the group out through a slow march to starvation. Some contemplate suicide while others focus on survival. The days just seemed to blend into one another. I'd lost count at day 17. I hadn't even realized that so many had passed until Gil showed me the calendar he'd fashioned from an old school notebook. "The army isn't picking us up, are they, Joel?" he asked. I'd been asking myself the same question, but Gil looked so worried that I couldn't bring myself to distress him further. "I'm not counting them out yet. Listen, Gil, we can't give up on ourselves, not ever. Even if doubts had crept like dark shadows into my head, there was no point in letting on. Some leader that would make." He didn't reply. He just picked up the M16 off the floor and walked to the sliding glass door. "Don't know how much longer I can keep it together," his voice was hollow. "I don't know. The sadness, everyone's sadness, I hear them. Their cries in the night. The walls can't contain it. I can't listen to it anymore." He began to jerk as emotion overwhelmed him and the tears came. "It can't go on like this, Joel. I know I can't." I joined him at the glass door and watched the darkness distort all that I loved, all that we were. It wasn't easy to keep it together when somebody else was losing it, but I felt I had a responsibility to be strong. We stood there for God only knows how long. The sky was as the earth, muddied, wretched, and dark. You can suffer a case of vertigo from staring for too long. Standing there, remembering all that this view once offered, the beautiful vistas in the fall, the lush greens of the summer foliage, the crisp whites of winter snow, I realized that memory was all that remained of this place. In my mind's eye, I saw the sun come out and cleanly sweep over the trees and the lawn, the field and the pool, all that I knew were there, but could no longer see through the thick black rain falling hard from a bitter sky, just beyond the glass.
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm reminded now that how dark the first novel is, really. On the one hand, it felt, okay, this could have been ripped out of the pages of the newspaper. What starts it? And
Right,
starts, yeah. I don't want to say that unless someone will discover that when they read it. And then as it proceeds, you're very close in that small group of young adults. And maybe that's where we could start the discussion about whether it's a young adult story or an adult story. It is. The characters are young adults in this, and so you're going through their perspective on this event.
Right. They're seniors in high school, just about to graduate. Summer's just upon them, and they take that camping trip, which essentially saves them from the apocalyptic end. I honestly visualized the book when I was 19 and came up with the idea, the Judas Syndrome, what a great story that is, biblically, a great story. It was a story I wanted to write about, and post-apocalyptic fiction seemed a great place to start and include it. So, yeah, they're 17, 18-year-olds.
Well, you keep the voice of a young adult very well.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Oh, yes. So with that, we should mention that there is some swearing in it, but not a heck of a lot.
Right.
A little bit of drug use. But again, it's definitely what characters would be doing. And I was not uncomfortable with it at all. Yeah, it reads well. It reads well as an action. And the other thing I think was because it was in first person. Now, there are drawbacks to that, too, because the first person doesn't get to see everything and doesn't get to tell the reader everything. And sometimes a reader wants more. But on the other hand, the advantage is you're right into the emotions of this guy.
Right.
Why did you choose first person?
I actually prefer the first person tellings.
Okay.
Because for me, it's the character that drives the story rather than the situation. To read in first person allows the reader to really get inside the head, as you said, of the main character and understand why they made the choices. They can feel emotions for, maybe you don't understand it, maybe why, what's wrong with you, but you're living that life, right? You live the character's life and wonder if you'd make the same choices.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then I'm going to have to ask about book 2 when you write in the first person of Sarah.
Right. So the first book was Joel, male perspective, and Sarah, the female perspective. I've actually heard some good comments and compliments about the fact that you wouldn't really know that a man wrote the Sarah's role, which is great to hear. I'm in touch with my feminine side, I guess. It's good to hear, and it was really easy for me, actually.
I was going to say, how difficult was it? But
no,
easy?
It was easy. It was. Yeah, I don't know why. I have a wife that is a playwright, and she writes from the women's perspective all the time, and so maybe I picked that up.
Okay,
it's certainly possible too.
Okay. Now, if I'm not mistaken, you said your wife is also your editor, one of your editors.
One of my editors, yeah.
So she'd be able to pick up if you were losing the feminine voice.
Absolutely, absolutely. And my other editor is also a female, so that worked out very well. Yeah, yeah.
Now, that second book is going to be very interesting, too, with the rebirth. And before we go there, I want to come back to the Judas Syndrome. You said that you liked the story from the Bible, the Judas one. It's not a biblical story, though. It doesn't mirror the Bible story.
Right.
Right.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah. Although I do like your interpretation of who the Judas is, and I'm not giving that away either. Yeah. I liked that a lot.
Yeah, no, throughout this series, the phrase the Judas Syndrome is examined and approached in different ways. You'll recognize the quote-unquote Judas character when it happens against the quote-unquote Jesus character, if you will, in different manifestations. But neither is meant to represent the biblical characters through anything more than paralleling recurring events kind of idea, right? Yeah. And that being said, is it Christian fiction? No. No. It's not Christian fiction, as you said. Though the title may seem to fit the genre, it's not Christian fiction. And though I borrowed the biblical character's name to instill a sense of what the reader may come to realize within the greater plot of the trilogy, there are biblical references to the apocalypse and a spirit or angel that becomes increasingly important as the story unfolds. But it's not a story targeted to the Christian fiction genre or audience.
Exactly. And I liked that. I liked that it was a modern day story. I like contemporary stories. I don't read a lot of historical fiction, but some I do. Now let's talk about the crossover audience, because as its characters are young adults, but adults are reading this. This book will be found in the adult collection at the library here in Stouffville.
Right. And I think for good reason.
I think they're going to be the primary audience.
I think they have been. I've heard reviewers say that it's a young adult fiction written for an adult audience. I've heard that more than once, and that's fine with me. Not to say I would discourage the young adult audience. I think they could handle the content.
Oh, yes, easily.
I think that they live the content, whether they'll admit it to their parents or not.
Yeah.
But considering what young adult books are out now dealing with similar dystopian themes and so on, like The Hunger Games and more recently Divergent, which I'm actually reading right now. Yeah, I like to stay connected with the genre
with
too.
With the young adult titles.
Absolutely, yeah, because I mean, they're a good adult read too.
There are, and I'm finding more and more the crossover. I've been seeing this in the publishers' catalogs, and some of the blurbs is this one will be good for both readers, and it's making it difficult for myself in the children's library because more often we're saying, are you buying that or am I? Which budget is that coming out of?
Right.
I think I would love to sit in on 2 discussion groups who are reading this. One that's a young adult group, because I think they would be charged by it. Saying, if this happened to me, our group would do this, and who would you want in on your team? They could really see ways of applying that to their own lives just for fun even. Adults, I think, would be different. They would be more philosophical. And on that note, Joel is a philosopher, so I wondered, you must also enjoy philosophy of some sort. It comes out.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure. I mean, I love world religion. It's very interesting to me to see how people live and how they experience life. And you say Joel's a philosopher. He's an intelligent and thoughtful 18-year-old.
Yes.
And though he enjoys a party as much as any young person, in the story, his father's tragic death sort of forced Joel to grow up early and to take on responsibilities an average teen sort of, shouldn't be burdened with. That right there kind of puts you in a state of mind that you're meant for something maybe more. Or
there was more philosophy in the first one, I think. And Sarah was more of the practical person in the second one.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's for sure.
But I think, readers could also sit there and think, well, what would I do in this? What would I do? Oh, geez, I've never thought of that. And I guess I'm going to ask. Before we go to break, there's a scene where they meet some people and they're roasting meat over a fire. Yeah, they're all over the place. Do I want to know what animal they're eating? Or,
I can
are
leave
you keeping that?
I can leave that up to the imagination of the reader.
I'm going to leave it at that. Yeah. Okay, I've got my own imagination on that one because I thought, oh, please don't let it be cats. Okay, all right. I'll leave it to my imagination and to the reader's imagination, and we'll take a quick station break. Okay. I'll be right back.